Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're very excited to have everyone here today and to be able to celebrate this incredible event. It's my pleasure to introduce you and welcome you to TEDx Eastchester. Just to give a little background, Eastchester was established in 1664 and stands as one of the oldest towns in Westchester, probably the United States for that matter. The covenant that was part of the founding of Eastchester, drafted in 1665, was a declaration of shared purpose and responsibility, a reminder that collective well-being has always been at the heart of who we are. Today, TEDx Eastchester continues that tradition. We gather students, educators, leaders, and neighbors around ideas that inspire, connect, and call us to serve. From acts of kindness in the classroom to innovations that ripple across the globe, we're here to explore how service and connection not only shape our communities, but our shared sense of humanity. To open each TEDx event, we are asked to share a video from TED itself. And I'd like to take a moment to share that video with you today.
From Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq to Korea, in slums, in schools, in prisons, and in theaters, every day people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? TEDx is an initiative of the TED Conference, a nonprofit devoted to ideas worth spreading. We grant free licenses to allow TED-like events to spread globally. This event today is based on the TED Conference format and ideals, but is independently organized by your local community. So please make sure to thank the team of volunteers who worked so hard on today's event. It's their ideas, dedication, and time that made it all possible. It's they who booked all the speakers, and the views you'll hear today are, of course, those of those speakers, not necessarily of TEDs. We hope their talks spark an exciting conversation among you. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for openness and for critical thinking, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you'll take out. And now, on with the show.
Thank you. And I also want to be sure to take a moment to thank all those who made today possible. First, Nick Kasoris, whose inspiration, support, and hard work were bedrocks for this event today. For Patrick Perry, who brought to life TEDx in visual form. For Rob Jacoby, Nick Soshin, Brittany DeTaco, Joe Vitale, Joe Blute, Luis Lopez, who supported the technical genius behind this great endeavor. To our superintendent, Dr. Villanueva, the Board of Education, the administration at both the high school and middle school, the teachers, staff, custodial support that made all of this possible, thank you. And of course, our speakers, whose ideas are at the heart and soul of our event today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and Eastchester's heart. What a moment and what a day. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Villanueva, and our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and Technology, Robert Jacoby, to moderate today's event. Please extend them a warm welcome.
Good morning and welcome. I'd like to warmly welcome all of you to our very special event today and acknowledge Dr. Meyer. Actually, can we give him a round of applause, please? And also acknowledging Supervisor Colavita, our board trustees, Superintendent Alm, the friends and families of our speakers and our students. Today is a perfect example of how our boundaries for learning exceed physical space. While we aim to bring learning opportunities that transcend time and space, we welcome and learn from the world today through our speakers' generous stories, and perhaps the world may learn just a little more about Eastchester through this special event. Today's talks are divided into two parts, Voices of Change and Pathways and Possibilities, each highlighting how ideas born in local hearts can inspire global change. It is an amazing group of speakers who have put countless hours into this day to make it happen. And so now let's get to what you've all come to see and hear. Our first session this morning opens with voices that remind us how service begins with purpose and connection. From global movements for happiness and compassion to youth-led innovations in health, storytelling, and social impact, these talks illuminate how individuals of all ages can shape a kinder, more connected world. It is now my pleasure to introduce my co-moderator, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and Technology, Mr. Robert Jacoby.
Thank you and good morning. It is my great honor to co-moderate this morning's event with Dr. Villanueva. Speakers share projects that bridge creativity and community, founding organizations that empower others using poetry to spark empathy, exploring health policy and well-being, and designing games that teach resilience. Together, their stories reveal how acts of service, when rooted in imagination and care, ripple outward to transform lives. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is a key member of the community who has helped us reimagine the place of service in our lives and schools, Nick Katsouris. Through his work in founding the Lukumi Make a Difference Foundation, Nick has inspired thousands of young people to find purpose through kindness. His message, service can start with one simple act, one dream, one child. Please offer a big round of applause for Nick Katsouris.
Good morning, everyone. It's really such an honor and a pleasure to be here today for TEDx Eastchester, in a town my wife and I moved to 23 years ago. We raised our children here, so really it's a pleasure. And I'd like to start off today with a question. I'd like to ask you all, how would you like to make a difference in the world? And we're going to talk about something that I like to call the Lukumi effect. And it's a very simple equation. You find something that makes you happy, something that you're passionate about, and then you use that to discover your purpose. And when you do discover your purpose, then you use that to make a difference in the world, to make a difference in the lives of others. And what happens then? You make a difference in your own life as well. So let's talk about purpose for a moment. What is purpose? Purpose is something that gets you up in the morning. Purpose is something that excites you, something that drives you, that empowers you, that makes you do amazing things with your life. And it can be anything. It could be whatever it is that you want to do, something it is that you love, and it can change over the course of your life. So now I'd like to engage you in an exercise. I'd like to ask you to indulge me. I'd like to ask you all to please close your eyes so that we can think about what our purpose is in life. So while your eyes are closed, think about what it is that you love. What do you love to do? What are you passionate about? What was your favorite subject in school? Or if you're out of school, what was, if you're a student, if you're working now. What do you like to do outside of school or work? Do you like a sport? Do you play sports? Do you follow sports? Do you like the arts? Do you like to dance or sing or paint? Do you like to help people? And if you like to help people, how? Do you like to help the homeless? Do you like to help the environment? Do you like to help animals? And these are all things that I want you to think about, not just today, but in the days, weeks, months, and years ahead, how you can use what you love to do to make a difference in the world. Now, please open your eyes, and I'd like to tell you, and continue to think about that, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about my life and my purpose. So I found my purpose early in life. I discovered it later in life, but somewhere in between, it got a little jumbled. So when I was younger, I loved to write. That was my purpose. I loved to write. And I wrote every chance I could. And that's the first lesson here. If there's something you love to do, you may be doing it already, but find more ways to do it. Go out there and do it. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. Go out there, find what you want to do. So that's what I did. I wrote for my school newspaper, I wrote for my church newsletter, I entered writing contests, poetry writing contests, and then I was in college and I had to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So I applied to Columbia University Journalism School, but what I did was I went to law school because I had a great opportunity. My father was a professor at Fordham Law School for 60 years, and we got to go to Fordham Law School tuition-free. So I took that opportunity. And what did I do? When I was in law school, I became really interested in the judicial system. And when I got out of law school, I worked for a federal judge as his law clerk. And there I was on a daily basis watching murder trials, arson trials, organized crime trials, things you think happen only on television, but they happen in the courtroom every day. So I was inspired. What did I do? I went back to my roots of writing. So when I got out of that job, I was about to go to a law firm, but I took 6 weeks off. I bought a laptop computer, I rented an apartment in Key Largo, Florida, and I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I wanted to keep the energy in. Everybody thought I was a beach bum, but what I did was I wrote in that apartment in Key Largo, Florida for 10, 12, 14 hours a day. I came back to New York with a 400-page first draft of a legal thriller called Crimes of Fire. I thought I was going to be the next John Grisham overnight. Never happened. I did a bunch of book signings up and down the East Coast of the United States, but then the road ended. So what did I do? I went back to what I knew. I went back to my legal career. And I worked as general counsel of a corporation in New York City for 28 years. Along that road, though, a box of candy changed my life. And you may say, how is that possible? So 22 years ago, I was in the kitchen with my wife, and someone brought us back a box of Lukumi candy from Greece. It's a candy. And to be honest with you, I never really liked the taste, but I said, let's try it again. I still didn't like the taste, but we joked around. I liked the name, and we said, wouldn't that make a cute name for a children's book character? So we joked around some more. What kind of character would it be? We came up, because of the powdered white sugar on the candy, we thought, how about a fluffy white lamb that goes around the world and makes a difference and meets friends? So didn't think much more of it. A year later, our son was born. He's now 21 years old. He's a senior at Tufts University right outside of Boston. And I wanted to write a children's book, just for me and just for my son. I tried to find a publisher. There wasn't a publisher around that would publish a book about a fluffy lamb named Lukumi. Tried to find an agent, more closed doors. And here's the lesson. Don't let doors close in your face. Find a way to open them. Find a way to make what you want to do happen. So that's what I did. I self-published. Self-published the book, printed 1,000 copies, sold them out of my garage. I sent one copy to the New York Times newspaper. The New York Times wrote an article about this little self-published book, and it hit number 4 on the Barnes & Noble Children's Book bestseller list. My dream, my passion, my purpose of becoming an author came true. So now, like the Lukumi effect, I wanted to take it to the next level. I wanted to use that purpose, that passion that I had, to make a difference in the lives of other people. So I wrote the second book. There's now 10 books in this series, but the second book is about what do you want to be when you grow up, and how can you use that to change your life and the lives of others. So with that book, we started a program called Lukumi Dream Day, where we make kids' career dreams come true for a day. And it's something we still do today. And our first winner back in the year 2008 wanted to be a Mars rover engineer. I didn't even know what that was. And I was hoping that she wasn't going to win because I didn't know how it was possibly going to make that dream day come true. Sure enough, she won, so I started to panic, but then I called NASA blindly. Didn't know anyone there, and I said, we have this 9-year-old girl, Sophie, from Great Neck, Long Island. What can you do for us? They said, we are landing a spaceship, the Phoenix, on the planet Mars, Memorial Day weekend of 2008. Bring her to our Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, and she can sit inside Mission Control and watch the Phoenix land on the planet Mars. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We went out there. It was like being in the middle of a science fiction film. The Phoenix landed on Mars, but the best part of it was seeing Sophie's face with that big smile on her face, where she realized that she could do this. Up until now, people were discouraging her, saying, that's too out of the box. Why do you want to be a Mars rover engineer? Do something safer with your life, something more constant. But that experience made her realize that she could believe in herself and that anything is possible. And that's true. You have to go for what you want to do. A lot of kids come to me and say they want to do things that are out of the box. And sure, things are difficult. A lot of kids say they want to be an actor, right? It's very hard to be an actor in today's society. But if you don't go for it, if you don't try, you'll never know, and you'll regret it. But along that path, you follow that path, maybe you won't become the next Oscar-winning actor, but you could become a movie producer, or a screenwriter, or a cinematographer, or a makeup artist. We made a kid's dream day come true 10 years ago. He wanted to be a quarterback for the New York Giants. We had him play with Eli Manning in the New York Giants. He just graduated college, called me up 6 months ago and said, Nick, he goes, I'm working for the National Football League as a film editor, because he followed that path. So, incredible opportunity for this young girl. Here I was back in California for this Mars landing, and I had some time on my hands. I had the whole weekend, so I called a friend of mine to have lunch. His name is John Aniston. John was an actor on the Days of Our Lives soap opera for many years. He's also the father of actress Jennifer Aniston. So he was hearing what we're doing with the Mars landing, and he said, this is really cool. He goes, I would love to be part of this Lukumi thing in some way. So I said, you know what? We're releasing a new book, and here's the next lesson. Don't be afraid to ask people for help. People will want to help you. Everyone was in your position at one time in their lives. They will want to help you. So I asked. I said, John, how about you and Jennifer narrate the next Lukumi book on CD? That was when CDs were a thing. I show kids CDs today. They don't know what I'm talking about. And sure enough, went back to my legal job. 3 weeks later, I'm driving home from Manhattan. I'm in the car. The cell phone rings. I put it on speaker. It was John Aniston. He said, Jen will do it. I almost drove off the road. Here I was. Jennifer Aniston was going to narrate the next book, Lukumi's Good Deeds, which became the hallmark of the Lukumi effect, the hallmark of the Lukumi Make a Difference Foundation in later years, teaching kids to make a difference in the world for things that they're passionate about, so that philanthropy becomes fun for them and not forced. So there we were. We released this book. We started a program called Make a Difference with Lukumi Day. One day, an annual celebration where kids would go out and they'd do good deeds. And that's what happened. The first year we had about 1,000 kids that went out and did good deeds. The years went on. We released another book. And the next book was called Lukumi's Celebrity Cookbook. And it was a cookbook for St. Jude Children's Hospital that we did. We had a recipe from Oprah Winfrey. We had a recipe from Taylor Swift, Nicole Kidman. And then I got a recipe from Morgan Freeman. And I was so excited. Open up the email, download the attachment. I open up the recipe. It was a recipe for roast leg of lamb. Get it? Lukumi's a lamb. So I call up his office, and I speak to his assistant, and I said, it took me 2 days to get the nerve to call the office. I said, thank you so much. It's a great recipe. My wife and I are going to use it at Easter time, but I can't use it in the book. She got defensive. She goes, why not? I said, you do realize Lukumi's a lamb. She laughed so hard she dropped the phone on the floor. 2 months later, I was working on the next book, Lukumi and the Schoolyard Bully, and I needed a voice for the bully character. Who's got a great voice? Morgan Freeman. So again, don't be afraid to ask. I asked, he said yes. He recorded it in 2 days because of that light moment that we had because of the recipe. So the Lukumi movement marched on. By 2014, we were working with 40,000 children, and I received a national award from the Points of Light organization and USA Weekend magazine for all the work that we were doing. I was down in Washington, D.C. for the ceremony. It was broadcast on the Today Show. Savannah Guthrie presented me with the award. My head was exploding. That night on the train coming back to New York, I said to my wife, I'm so inspired here. There's so much more that we can do. This is not just a book series. This is a foundation, a charitable foundation. So in 2014, we started the Lukumi Make a Difference Foundation. And today, a little over a decade later, we're working with 150,000 children in 30 countries around the world, teaching them the Lukumi effect. Find what you love to do. Discover your purpose. use it to make a difference in the world, and then it'll make a difference in your life as well. So it grew to a place, from a box of candy, it grew to a place that I never could have imagined. And that's the beauty of it all. So I was kind of torn because things were starting to happen. I was being asked by schools to develop good deed curriculums. I was asked to speak at places like the World Happiness Summit. We started a good deed council of schools across 18 hours of time zones where these kids collaborate on global good deed projects. I mean, you guys remember Miley Cyrus a couple of years ago when she won her first Grammy and she was singing and she goes, "I won my first Grammy. I'm giving a TED Talk today. I can't believe this." You never know where that life is going to take you. But I was still stuck. I was stuck in a parallel life with another job that I was still in, a job that I liked, but I didn't love. This is what I loved. This is what I wanted to do. And the final straw was when a friend of mine came to me. And he came to me and he said, "Nick," he goes, "I'm leaving my job." And I said, "Why are you leaving?" I said, he was working at a hedge fund in New York City, really successful. And he said, "You know what, Nick?" He goes, "You get to a point in your life where if you're lucky, you have one good act left." And he wanted to do something else. And those words haunted me for about 3 months because I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do this whole Lukumi thing. There were so many things that we wanted to do. And I left. I left 3 years ago, and I've never been happier in my professional life than I am right now. And that could be anyone. That could be anyone that's got something that they want to do that they're passionate about. And just to show you, we did a research study with the Lukumi Foundation. Let's see, there it is. Earlier this year, we interviewed over 1,000 children from 20 countries. And these children said that when they do good, they feel better, they feel happier, they have increased self-esteem, they have improved mental health, they have purpose in life. And that purpose makes them happier, makes them more engaged learners, makes them better students, makes them better leaders. That's something that can happen to everyone. So before I leave today, I want you to think about what you were thinking about when you had your eyes closed. I want you to continue to think about it in the days, weeks, months, years to come. I want you to think about how you can use that Lukumi effect, how you can take what you love, what you're passionate about, and how you can make a difference in the world. Because you know what? You'll make a difference in your own life as well, and you'll never be happier. Thank you so much.
From our own Eastchester High School halls to the national stage, Ava Cesperas is an alum of EHS and now a student at Harvard's Medical School. She is a champion of youth leadership and health equity. Today, she'll share how a student voice can shape healthier futures. Please welcome to the stage, Ava.
Good morning. At age 9, with my friends, we used to braid friendship bracelets. We would sit at my kitchen table after school and on the weekends with a beautiful bag of string of all colors and sit together and braid friendship bracelets. At the time, it was a simple hobby. It was something that brought us together. But this hobby became something bigger when we began to sell these friendship bracelets to raise money for cancer research. We got together as a team for our local Relay for Life chapter of the American Cancer Society and called ourselves Braiding Bracelets. We would sell these bracelets and donate all of our proceeds. I didn't realize it at the time, but every bracelet represented compassion and hope. It was leading me towards a lifelong purpose that I wasn't even aware of at the time. In that way, I began to learn my first lesson about health, as I was doing something to help someone with a disease that I barely knew anything about. As I learned about cancer incidence rates and how cancer affects different people, I realized that health is personal, communal, and it's a team effort that affects everyone and their families unequally. As a college student in New York City, I would walk to class, passing world-renowned hospitals alongside people who couldn't afford basic care or a doctor's appointment. This realization left me with a great foundation for research, to get involved to figure out how I can bridge these gaps. And I'm proud to say that my first research project began right in this building in my advanced science research class as a high school student. My first study was titled Project ScanVan, Mobile Mammography Services to Decrease Socioeconomic Barriers and Racial Disparities Among Medically Underserved Women in New York City. We analyzed the data of a mobile mammography van, and a mobile mammography van is exactly what it sounds like. It's a van equipped with the latest technology to provide life-saving screening to women who need it. This van, most importantly, provides these screenings free of cost. Anyone can show up not speaking English, without health insurance, and receive the care that they need. We studied the data of over 2,400 women who were served by this van. We realized that the van was successful in overcoming traditional barriers that women may face when seeking out breast cancer screening. The van also followed women and provided follow-up care as needed. As a high school student, I realized this seems to have the potential to bring care to more communities. I wondered how many people don't know about a mobile mammography van, as I didn't know about it prior to this research. So I took this data and I created an organization that organizes breast cancer screening services, free or low cost, around the 5 boroughs of New York City. You can log on to my website, click the borough you live in, say the Brooklyn or the Bronx, for example, and you can see all of the free or low-cost breast cancer screening services near you, as well as a schedule at when they will be at a place near you. For example, a scan van can stop at your church or outside your community center, and you can get the care you need right there. These mobile screenings have the potential to save lives, and my data showed that these scan vans are successful in reaching women who need it. When the pandemic hit, I realized how delicate this progress could be. I studied how barriers to breast cancer screening were worsened amidst COVID-19. We realized that as a whole, preventable diseases became more dangerous, not because they were more aggressive, but because care became out of reach. This important realization led me back to what I was studying when I was making friendship bracelets. I didn't even know I was studying at the time, but I was learning about compassion. And I realized that compassion needs to be accompanied by action in order to make sure that a person's zip code doesn't determine their health or their health opportunities. I also pivoted, and I wanted to learn about how breast cancer screening varies around the world. I studied countries like China, Japan, and Germany, and I looked at their approaches to population breast cancer screening. I realized that medicine is shaped by its social context. Policy determines and represents what different countries and societies care about. For example, I found some countries focused on individual-level risk, while others focused on broader population-level initiatives, including some mobile vans. I also brought my studies back to the US, and I looked specifically at how women at high risk of breast cancer are receiving the screening that they need. We studied specialty primary care providers, and we realized that there were certain barriers, such as a lack of knowledge about high-risk breast cancer technology, as well as a lack of time that a doctor has with a patient in order to fully understand their risk. This realization led me to study more about how we can work with storytelling and communities to bridge the gap between technology and community needs. This really opened my eyes to the fact that medical innovation doesn't always mean new technology. Innovation can also mean taking the resources that we have and making them more accessible, more community-based, and more available to the people who need it. I also brought my studies to a specific borough, which is the Bronx, and I looked at how diabetes affects the community. I learned that a complex complication of diabetes is diabetic foot ulcers. And diabetic foot ulcers, if leads to an amputation, has a mortality rate double that of all cancers. And people in the Bronx who have diabetes are at an increased rate of amputation. And globally, 50% of people who undergo amputation pass within 5 years. That striking statistic represents a life forever changed, a family member who loses a loved one, or a person who loses a limb. This data brought me back to what started this whole mission, which was compassion. I didn't realize it at the time, but as a student making friendship bracelets with my friends in elementary school, I was learning how small actions can lead to impact and how storytelling, people, and communities could lead to answering important questions and discovering important information that can shape the future of health and medicine. I discovered my purpose when I started making friendship bracelets, and it is so amazing to see how that has grown into research. Thank you.
A nice warm welcome, students. You're in for a treat today. I get to introduce our next speaker, Maggie Hines. Maggie is an 8th grade student at Eastchester Middle School whose compassion and curiosity inspire those around her. Guided by a belief that small acts of kindness can create powerful ripples, Maggie's TEDx talk explores how hope and service can transform both individuals and communities. Through her words, she reminds us that even the youngest voices can lead with empathy, courage, and purpose. A big round of applause for Maggie.
Beyond the diagnosis, finding light in autism. Imagine this. You're at a family gathering. The air is filled with laughter, conversation, and the smell of a home-cooked meal. Everyone is talking at once. Cousins running around, parents catching up, and voices overlapping in a comforting symphony of chaos. At the edge of the room, I noticed 2 boys. One lines up his toy cars with perfect precision, each one angled exactly the same. The other is asking question after question, his curiosity endless and his energy lighting up the space around him. Those boys are my cousins, Matthew O'Donoghue and Jack Boynes, and they are the reason I am who I am today. Growing up alongside them shaped me into the person I am. Autism has been a part of my life story, not because I live with it, but because I love people who do. Through Matthew and Jack, I've learned that autism is not just about a diagnosis. It's about resilience, family, patience, and love that grows stronger every day. I've seen the challenges, the victories, the hard days, and the beautiful ones. And through all of it, I've learned what it means to lead with empathy. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, about 1 in 31 children in the United States are identified with the autism spectrum disorder, with boys being diagnosed nearly 4 times more often than girls. Globally, about 1 in 100 children are estimated to be on the autism spectrum. Autism spectrum disorder can often be diagnosed as early as the age of 2, but many children are not diagnosed until later in life, which delays the support they need. These numbers remind us that awareness is only the beginning. Understanding and acceptance must follow. When I was little, I didn't know what autism meant. I just knew my cousins as Matthew and Jack, their laughter, their quirks, their kindness. But as I grew older, I began to understand the challenges they face. For some, the world can be louder, brighter, and more overwhelming. Routines become comfort. Change feels like chaos. And yet, within that same world exists an extraordinary beauty, a way of seeing that is unique, brilliant, and honest. Matthew and Jack taught me that love doesn't always look or sound the same. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's repetitive. Sometimes it's found in patterns, gestures, or the simple joy of lining up toy cars. Their love for the world and their way of expressing it taught me patience and empathy that being in ways no book or classroom ever could. They taught me that being different doesn't mean being less. It means seeing the world through a new lens, and that is a gift. When I realized how deeply autism has touched my life, I wanted to do something that would make a difference, not just for my cousins, but for families everywhere who share similar journeys. It all started with a simple lemonade stand, just a table, a few lemons, and a dream. But that small act turned into something much greater. Every cup of lemonade, every smile from a passerby, every dollar placed in the jar became a symbol of hope and kindness. What started as a summer project quickly grew into a mission. With the help of my family, friends, and community, I've raised over $5,000 for autism awareness and support. But what mattered most wasn't just the number, it was the meaning behind every dollar. Each donation told a story. A teacher gave because her student had autism. A mother donated with tears in her eyes because her son reminded her of my cousins. Strangers stopped by, smiled, and said, "Keep doing what you're doing." Those moments stayed with me. They reminded me that kindness doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needed to be real. Every lemonade cup became a ripple in a wave of compassion that continues to grow. That $5,000 was never just money, it was movement. It proved that one person's heart, when fueled by love, can spark change. It showed me that a sidewalk stand could stand for something huge. Every cent went towards making the world more understanding, more inclusive, and more kind. When I look back on those long days in the sun, squeezing lemons and counting change, I realized I wasn't just fundraising. I was learning what it means to change the world, one cup at a time. And that's what led me to the Lukumi Make a Difference Foundation, because I realized that doing good didn't have to stop when the lemonade ran out. Lukumi gave me a space to dream bigger, to turn that same energy and heart into something lasting. It showed me that when kindness shared multiplies. It became something greater than any one person. Through Lukumi, I've learned that compassion is contagious, that one good deed can inspire another, and that is the light that we share can spread farther than we will ever see. The Lukumi Foundation helped me discover my voice. It showed me that leadership doesn't always mean standing in front. It means standing beside others, lifting them up, and giving them strength. It taught me that kindness isn't random, it's intentional. It's a choice we make over and over again. Every time I've helped plan a project, volunteer, or have spoke about autism awareness, I wasn't just spreading information. I was spreading hope. I am endlessly grateful for the Lukumi Foundation because it helped me grow into the person I am today. It showed me that small acts of love can become movements of change. It reminded me that when we work together, we don't just change one life, we change entire communities. I have learned to lead, to organize, and to speak up. And I've realized that doing good isn't something you do just once. It's something you live every single day. Autism has taught me about courage, the courage to be misunderstood, to persevere, to love deeply even when the world doesn't always understand you. It taught me that inclusion begins with compassion, and compassion begins with understanding. Every person on the spectrum has something to teach us if we are willing to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. I believe that the world is brighter when we celebrate differences instead of fearing them. Too often, society defines people by what they can't do, instead of recognizing the incredible things they can. Autism doesn't just take away potential, it just reshapes it. It turns focus into dedication, passion into expertise, and love into loyalty that knows no limits. To me, advocacy is not about pity, it's about power. It's about empowering people like Matthew and Jack to live fully, to dream boldly, and to know that who they are is exactly who they're meant to be. It's about creating a world where no one has to apologize for being different. When I think of my cousin, I think of laughter echoing through the house. I think of shared smiles, of tiny movements that mean everything. I think of how much they've taught me about patience, acceptance, and unconditional love. I am so proud to be their cousin, their advocate, and their voice when the world needs reminding that autism is not a tragedy. It's a way of seeing beauty that others might miss. To anyone listening who has a family member or friend on the autism spectrum, know that you are a part of something extraordinary. You have the power to change how the world sees autism through your words, your compassion, and your example. Together, we can rewrite the story of what it means to be different. We could build a world where differences are not hidden, but honored, where no child grows up believing they are less, when love is louder than judgment, and kindness becomes the language we all speak. I'm grateful for every organization, every teacher, every friend, and every family who stands for understanding and inclusion. You are the light that guides this movement. You remind us that empathy isn't weakness, it's strength. And that together, we could turn awareness into action and compassion into lasting change. Because in the end, autism is not a limitation, for it is a reflection of everything that makes humanity so incredible: courage, individuality, and love. The light it brings into our world is something we should never dim, but always celebrate. So let's celebrate it, loudly, proudly, and endlessly. Because when we look beyond the diagnosis, we don't just find light, we find love. And that love has the power to change the world. Thank you.
From middle school to high school, I'm excited to invite our next speaker, Erica Lunenfeld, a 12th grader at Eastchester High School, to the stage this morning. Erica blends artistry and self-awareness together to explore vulnerability and silence in a world of noise. We feel so fortunate to have Erica join us this morning. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Hi, everyone. When I think about what today's culture calls strength, I think about explosions. I think about Marvel movies where Chris Evans only cries once in the 10 years he's been involved in them. Yet, in the movies that have been popular these days, in Star Wars, in Marvel movies, the most highest grossing films of the 2010s, it's, sorry. Power means control, and the strongest people tend to hold things together amidst chaos. And I believed that for a long time. I believed that strength meant holding it together, that composure meant chaos. That composure meant courage. But I've always been drawn to stories where people fall apart, where emotion isn't a weakness, it's a force of nature. The kind of characters who love so hard it destroys them. In Orwell's 1984, love itself is rebellion. In the movie Gia, emotion is radioactive. It kills her and makes her unforgettable. Even in Joni Mitchell's album Blue, heartbreak becomes a masterpiece. We call these tragedies, but in reality it's just proof that a society cannot handle these intense emotions. It has to punish it. And yet, those are the moments that make us feel the most alive. Maybe I like messy stories because they remind me of a truth I keep forgetting, that breaking down isn't the opposite of being strong, it's the beginning of it. Because what's harder, pretending nothing gets to you or letting the world see what actually does? Maybe real power isn't control, maybe it's surrender, the willingness to stand there shaking and say, I feel this. That's where this all started for me, realizing that every story I loved wasn't about invincibility, it was about feeling too much in a world that tells you not to. Which makes sense, because honestly, we're living in our own kind of dystopia now. Not one ruled by 1984's Big Brother, but by detachment, where nonchalant is a compliment and chalant is not even a word, but we'll get to that later. But for now, maybe we can agree on this. If love was rebellion in 1984, then vulnerability might be ours. I've always hated small talk. It's performing humanity on a 5-second delay. But my generation doesn't really do small talk either. Instead, we've invented something even worse. I call this deflective talk. Someone might say something really vulnerable, like I haven't been feeling like myself lately at all, and just follow that with LOL. It's our way of bubble wrapping honesty. Like, yes, I'm spiraling, but people say that in a quirky way. LOL is the modern fig leaf. It hides our trembling, but also proves it's there. We're fluent in irony because sincerity feels dangerous. We joke about pain, and somehow through that humor, we're actually reaching for each other. It's kind of bizarre, but also beautiful. Still, I think there's a kind of magic that only happens when we take off that final layer of bubble wrap. When you say something honest without the emoji safety net. One winter, I wrote a Christmas card to my friend's chemistry teacher, which was totally unsolicited, kind of unhinged. But somehow it changed something. Now we talk in the hallway all the time, actually. And that moment taught me that vulnerability isn't collapse, it's generosity. It's saying the real thing even when no one asked for it. And when you do, something shifts. People see you. They remember that sincerity still exists in a world built on staged directions. Maybe that's why I hate small talk so much. Because I'm not looking to talk, I just want to connect. We live in a world that never stops talking. Even in silence, our minds buzz like full rooms. A few days ago, having forgotten my headphones at home, I actually was on the bus just in silence. And that felt so uncomfortable to me until I realized that I actually felt free eventually. Because for the first time in a long time, I met myself unscripted. We fill every pause with noise, anything to avoid the cracks. Our culture prizes authenticity, but only the kind that photographs well. Our culture, the real unfiltered moments, the ones that sting or soften or sit in the dark, don't sell. They can't be packaged or posted. Miss Lauryn Hill once said that her best art came from experience, not production. And I think that's the heart of it. If we can't bear our own silence, then we can't bear someone else's honesty. If we can't be vulnerable, how can we offer it to anyone else? So maybe the most radical act isn't sharing a secret or sending a message to someone. Maybe it's simply being still, letting the silence crack you open, because in that quiet, in that gap, vulnerability finally has room to breathe. But it's exactly in that brokenness, that vulnerability becomes radical. Every act of connection is a rebellion. Every truth you speak is resistance. Every risk you take to show up honestly is a tiny revolution. Tell your friends you love them so much that it hurts. Tell that freshman that you randomly saw who's wearing your favorite band's t-shirt that you love that band too. A text that says, I miss you, a real apology, small things, but small is enough. Because in a culture that prizes attachment, caring fully is dangerous, and that's precisely why it matters. Idealism isn't childish, it's radical. It's saying, yes, the world is cracked and cruel and cynical, and still I will love, I will hope, I will connect, I will create. Let me be vulnerable with you right now. I almost didn't do this tech talk. I almost backed out of it yesterday because I wasn't prepared. But vulnerability doesn't guarantee safety or reward, but it guarantees reality. It guarantees connection, and connection, real, messy, unfiltered connection, is where courage lives. Because the revolution won't come as a battle cry. It will come as a whisper, as a text sent at 2 a.m., as the silence between two people who finally have the courage not to pretend. And in a world that numbs us, cynicizes us, flattens us, the courage to feel might just be what saves us. Thank you.
An alumni of Bronxville High School and a true social innovator and entrepreneur, now a sophomore at Columbia University and an economics major, Simos Dimas is reimagining how a simple idea can transform education and the post-secondary educational opportunities for students of all backgrounds through the college process and on-campus visits. Please welcome Simos to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I founded a nonprofit whose mission is to sponsor, make possible, no-cost college campus visitation for under-resourced students. But let's start this story with travel. What does travel make possible? What are the unique possibilities and opportunities that are inspired only through traveling? Let's turn to 20th century writer Paul Fussell, who talks about this in his work. For Fussell, there were different types of people according to how much they traveled, or in the Latin origin of the word travel, travail, to experience pain or discomfort. Fussell's favorite were the explorers. They traveled, they travailed the most, they thus discovered the most. Fussell's least favorite were the tourists, people there just to check a box. They didn't travail that much, they didn't discover that much. As a 19-year-old inheritor of our modern digital project, I'm worried about our collective future. In particular, I'm worried about the growing disconnect between the places that we're in and the people that we're with in those places. To put things in Fussell's terms, I'm worried that in our own lives, we're too easily tourists with the illusion that we're explorers. But these places in the real world which we travel to, they've got some pretty unique powers. Think about them. First, just in getting here today, you guys had to travel here, right? You had to give up something else. Some of you are not in class right now. You have to be here, right? And you can't swipe away this reality that you're living in. Perhaps the most significant power that a place does contain, it's bigger than us. Right? When you arrived here, your field of view, even at school this morning, it was instantly opened up in ways that you never literally could have seen before. Places are bigger than us. When we're also there, we're not the center of entertainment. We're humans in a human environment. In the best of places right now, hopefully you're in a dialogue with the place, with all of your senses, with your mind, and perhaps even with your soul. A few summers ago, hot summer evening, I traveled to Upper Manhattan and listened to a speaker talk to some students about their fears in college admission. I was sitting in the audience, just as you all are now, and I was struck because these students all shared pretty much the same fears that I had in college admission. Except there was a difference that most of these students had actually never traveled to a college campus before. As a junior in high school, I had been visiting schools, I think for maybe 4 years, sort of crazy. But at that time, generally for myself, I felt rather lost. If you took me, CMOS, I felt no place. Except that sitting in that audience, listen to students be honest and vulnerable, they seemed a lot stronger than I was. And so I was inspired. I hatched an idea to bring us all to places that we had never been to before. For the students that would be a part of the first tour organized by the nonprofit I founded, we would journey to college campuses. Together, we would journey, struggle, strive for our dreams. And in the last 3 years, granitusa.org has made possible no-cost college campus visits to 21 schools for more than 600 student campus visits. I very vividly remember the first tour. Junior year, February break, it was quite cold. We had to get up early, and there was a lot of traffic. I was sort of annoyed and scared. But when we arrived on that campus, it was quite a moment of truth. We felt triumphant. Because even just in getting to that college campus, the students and I, we understood we had overcome some pretty significant odds. And I think if we think about it, there are 5 main reasons that travel is transformative. The first is time as an investment. We talked about that already. You got to give up something, you got to get somewhere. And that foreshadows a pretty important truth about life. Meaning isn't created instantly. And the place that we're in can't be shed quickly if we don't like it. The second reason for the transformative power of travel is deep information. When you're in a place listening to the lecture, the depth that you discover is very significant. One of the great stories to illustrate this from one of our tours, we went to upstate New York in the spring, in March. As you'd probably guess, most of the students on our tours are juniors. This time we were joined by a senior, a gentleman named Ray, who's now a friend of mine. Ray, as a senior, had been accepted to many schools, but hadn't committed anywhere because it's very hard to find the conviction to go somewhere for 4 years when you've never been to that place. I will never forget the moment when on Cornell's campus, Ray told me he would be committing to Cornell. For Ray, seeing in Cornell was believing in Cornell, and seeing was also knowing. The third reason for the transformative power of travel is that the unedited is very real. When you see someone, a person up close, you see them in all their imperfections. That's very beautiful. And I think for students, finding what you don't like in schools is just as important as finding what you do like. That's not something you find in a quickly photoshopped image. The third reason for the transformative power of travel is, the fourth reason, just did 3. The fourth is the perspiration. When you're in a place, you gotta work hard, right? You gotta show up, you gotta ask people questions. It's harder to deal with like an actual person than their digital likeness, but it's a lot more rewarding. The final reason for the transformative power of travel is inspiration. Students on our tours have discovered that they want to do more. They don't just want to have quick emotional reactions on a glowing screen. GraniteUSA.orgs have taken us all across the Northeast. We've been all the way, we've been upstate New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, DC, Massachusetts, West Virginia, Virginia, and we will keep on going. Our strategy has been to find organizations and communities that already provide academic support for students, right? So students work hard after the class to learn and study. GraniteUSA.org shows them literally what they're studying for and why that's so important. And through the financial support of our donors who believe in service in education, our buses will keep on rolling. Even though now I'm not able to attend every tour like I used to, I still really strive to be with the students in person. Why is that? Well, I need to go from my place to their place. I need to journey to the students. They also probably need to know that someone journeyed for them. In doing so, we affirm the power that we just talked about. If we think about GraniteUSA.org, it's very much a counter-narrative to much of what the modern digital project tells us. And it exposes, actually, that many of these things, the things that it tells us, are illusions. We're told that everything can be accessible instantly, immediately, with very little effort right here, right? You have all the knowledge, you have all your friends, you have anything you could want. Yet GraniteUSA.org tells that unless you travail, it doesn't have meaning. Let's just think very elementally for a second. Joy and discovery, what must occur in order for those to be possible, is time, is struggle, is venturing into the unknown. The final illusion that the modern digital project tells us very often is that we don't need each other, right? I don't need you because I have all the answers, I have all the knowledge that I can want here, and it's very easy to interact with this thing. GraniteUSA.org, the discovery comes from being like with each other, right next to each other. One of the things I discovered on these tours is that the ceiling to meaning in the digital world is very low. But again, when we're here, right, present, and with one another, there is no ceiling to what we can discover. Our purpose, to go to my fellow Greek's point earlier, our purpose, again, needs to be defined by human sacrifice, by reaching out to someone else, trying to do something for them that they might not be able to do for themselves. The hope of folks like Gates, maybe that tech would fade into the background, has failed. We've become addicted to the feed. In fact, we've become the feed itself. And you feel godlike on the Modern Digital Project. Again, you're the total arbiter of your fate because everything's here and you control this thing. In fact, what we're suffering from is an atrophy of our humanism, which can only be combated by journeying, travailing with one another. When I founded GraniteUSA.org, I was rather purposeless. In many ways, I was afraid. Afraid of how others would judge me, afraid I would fail. Ultimately, I was a prisoner of my own self. But what I found in committing to service and education was something indescribably wonderful, both for myself as well as for the students that have and will continue to join us on our tours. My deep request of all of us is that we use our education to serve others, and in doing so, score a very collective win. My call to action is that we abandon self and cast off fear. In the end, it is only the self which can be defeated. So I urge all of us to be selfless. Thank you very much.
In a moment when we are desperately trying to regain control over the role of social media in our lives, one young man is leading the way. Our next speaker is a 10th grader at Scarsdale High School. Arthur Luke Solar's app, Escape Goop, limits social media distractions, helping users reclaim focus, connection, and time for what truly matters. Please welcome Arthur to the stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Control, easy, fun, attainable. Today, I'll show you how I developed Escape Goose and how Escape Goose makes self-control feel like a game, not a challenge. I got the idea for this app because I personally wasted countless hours of my life on social media, to the point where the same Clash Royale video would have appeared in my feed. I asked myself, what am I doing with my life? Some people would call this a midlife crisis. I would call this an early life crisis. And it wasn't just me. I saw my friend Asher, who at 8:07 a.m. on a school day, when school starts at 8, was cutting class to watch YouTube shorts. Social media overcame his willpower. Now, look around you when you walk in a public space. People scroll their time and energy away, devoid of human interaction. Maybe even you feel that way. That wasted time, that lack of connection. And it isn't just happening to us. It isn't just happening to Asher. It's happening to the whole world. Nearly 30% of teenagers in America spend 6+ hours on social media in a typical day. And according to a U.S. Surgeon General report, just spending more than 3 hours a day on social media can double the risk of anxiety and depression. This problem is both widespread and dangerous, but not only that, it's growing by the hundreds of millions of users every single year. At the same time, suicide rates have increased by 62%. Thinking about my friends who are addicted to social media, I wanted to help. But first, before I could begin, I had to ask myself, how can I help them if I cannot help myself? So in 5th grade, I decided to spend the next 4 years learning how to code. By watching countless online tutorials and building countless practice apps, I learned the intricacies of Swift, C#, JavaScript, HTML, and Kotlin. And I also learned the mechanics of Unity, Xcode, and Android Studio. Finally, I decided I was ready to build an app that solved a lot of the issues of other screen time regulation tools. For example, how they're easy to override and ignore. Like in screen time, you can always do 1 more minute, 1 more day. It's way too easy to cheat and cheat yourself from overcoming your social media addiction. They're also lacking engagement. The user's motivation only comes from their determination. The app itself does not provide any of that motivation through a fun or engaging feature. So, how do we make self-control feel rewarding so the motivation not only comes from the user's determination, but from the app too? Well, that's why I made Escape Goose. Escape Goose takes this goose and the existing app and web blocking that creates something that doesn't feel like a challenge. It feels like a game. When the user opens Escape Goose, they're greeted with their goose. This is the goose that they care of. And by blocking apps and websites, they get more grain. And using this grain, they can feed their goose to make it bigger or buy shop items. Eventually, they can turn their goose farm into this. I mean, who doesn't want a goose farm like that? And it has caves, rocks, water, gold, grass. It's like a game. And this model is not unproven. It's been proven in apps like Duolingo, where users are encouraged through the gamification system to do a tedious task, learning a new language. And users keep up their streaks for weeks, months, and even years. As a result, I was ready to publish my app. I formed an LLC to get a code signing certificate from Microsoft to certify my app. With that, I published my app to Windows. Later, I would publish it to macOS, Chrome OS, iOS, and Android. And the results from Escape Goose are real. Before, one user reported 4 hours and 20 minutes on TikTok daily. But after just 1 month using Escape Goose, they brought it down to just 4 minutes. So, as you're living in this age of Instagram, of TikTok, of YouTube Shorts, our entire generation has been struggling with their addiction to social media. I've witnessed that struggle, I've felt that pain. And I'm part of this generation that's been disconnected, polarized, and broken by social media. And as this new generation, we're asked to work and succeed and find ourselves and build strong relationships with our family, friends, at work, at school, at home. But that hasn't happened yet with many of my friends and peers. We must all try to fight one of the greatest challenges plaguing our lives, to take back our time, our well-being, our mental health, and our country. Today, more than 13,000 people have downloaded Escape Goose, and my goal is to reach 1 million by the end of graduation. And I hope, however means works for you, are able to reclaim your time and your life from social media. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers in the first half of this morning's session. We will now have just a short 5-minute break. There are bathrooms located just outside the auditorium and light refreshments for those who might need them in the back. All right, so we have about 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome back. The second session this morning brings together global change makers and young innovators whose work centers on well-being, purpose, and the pursuit of a more compassionate world. From the science of happiness to the everyday practice of kindness, these talks explore how service and self-awareness can create lasting change. Speakers span generations, founders, advocates, and students, each reflecting on what it means to lead with empathy and to act with intention. Their stories remind us that whether through policy, poetry, or technology, every act of connection carries the potential to shape a brighter future. I now get to introduce Karen Guggenheim. Karen is the founder of World Happiness Summit, and she reminds us that flourishing communities begin with flourishing individuals. She'll explore how happiness, gratitude, and service intersect to improve lives. It is with great honor that I now welcome Karen to the stage.
Thank you. When I lost someone who I loved deeply, I learned something that I'll never forget. Life doesn't wait for us to notice it. You can't replay life. You either live it or you miss it. Even now, I remember the laughter, the tears, the sound of his voice, the conversations we had, the way his eyes lit up when I walked into a room. And yes, these memories tug at my heart, but they also make me feel incredibly grateful because they're reminders of the moments that I lived. These IRL moments lived in real life shape who I am today because they were lived in person with a person. We're living in a world with so many digital devices and digital experiences. So the question is, how can we make sure that we're truly experiencing life, the real one, with meaning and strong relationships that build lasting memories? Well, I propose that we do that through living more IRL, not URL. We're more connected than ever, yet lonelier than ever before. We post, we like, we scroll, we swipe. We have thousands of so-called friends and even followers, yet a lot less meaning. You see, as attention goes, so does meaning. Living in real life means being aware of what's going on around you and within you. It means paying attention to life as it unfolds. Because if you don't pay attention, your brain doesn't register the moment. Look, technology is amazing. We can reach out to people around the world. We can access information instantly. And we can share beauty in seconds and so much more. But did you know that when you take out your phone to capture a special moment, like your loved one's wedding or your best friend blowing out their birthday candles, your brain stops fully recording? Scientists call that the photo-taking impairment effect. When we rely on the phone to save the moment, our brains stop paying full attention. We delegate the memory to a camera. And the irony is that we take the photo in the first place to remember, yet in doing so, we often remember less. Neuroscientists tell us that attention is a gatekeeper of memory. And memory is the substance of what our lives are built on. Now, if you're not attending to that, you can't build a life full of these rich memories and relationships that you have. That's why the best memories are actually multisensory. When we engage sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, we engage the memory centers of our brains. They actually light up like fireworks. That's why we remember a sunset with a friend, or holding hands, or the taste of a great meal more vividly than a post or a video. Don't get me wrong, I love technology, but it's a tool. It's helpful, useful, fun, entertaining. It's just not a substitute for life. And no matter how advanced tech gets, it's not human. Think about a time when you met someone spontaneously. Maybe you were in line waiting for something, or you're at the library studying, or on a plane, and you had a conversation that sparked an unexpected friendship. That's serendipity. That's real life. And that only happens when we give our devices a break. For the last decade, I've been creating IRL experiences through large events like the World Happiness Summit, where people come from around the world to connect, learn, and live life fully. And I can tell you firsthand that transformation doesn't happen through information. It happens through connection. It happens through presence. You can't really get that from a screen. You can't TikTok your way to happiness. Here's the challenge, though. We have an attention crisis. The average attention span has fallen to around 8 seconds, lower than a goldfish. And studies from Stanford University show us that multitasking doesn't work. It just diverts our attention, it slows us down, and it can even increase anxiety. So we think we're doing more, but we're actually just missing more. We've trained our brains, our minds, to be everywhere except here. We even time travel in our thoughts. We think about the past or what's up next, but we struggle being in the now. And when we lose attention, we lose presence. And when we lose presence, we miss out on life. Because if we didn't attend to it, it's like it didn't happen, at least not for us. Now, living in real life does not only strengthen memories, it can also impact our biology. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson found that when people are together and share positive emotions like joy and love, our heart rhythms synchronize. Our hearts can literally start beating together when we connect in person. And researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison discovered something remarkable. When girls listened to their mother's voices after a stressful event, their cortisol levels, the stress hormone, dropped. And the oxytocin, the bonding hormone, increased. Now, for those who only texted or had no contact, there was no change in their biology. This is a powerful reminder that just hearing the voices of our loved ones can impact and regulate our nervous system. And then there's awe, the feeling of wonder when you're in the presence of the beauty of nature, or when you witness an incredible act of kindness, Awe expands time. It strengthens memories, and it increases happiness. Now, there's something else that real-life experiences give us: an opportunity for growth. When we live IRL, we are able to expand, and even though it's imperfect and surprising, we train our brains to be more flexible. It's like going to the gym, but for your brain. Psychologists call this cognitive flexibility, and it's tied to Dr. Carol Dweck's work on the growth mindset. The belief that we can keep learning, adapting, and expanding through experience. So how can we start living more in real life? Pay attention. If you're doing something, do it. If you're sending a text, send it. Don't walk down the hallway or airport terminal or sidewalk looking down at your phone, bumping into people. Finish the text. Put the phone away. Look up. Look around your surroundings. Connect with your environment. Smile. Say hello. And when you're with somebody, be with them. One of the greatest gifts you can give a person, especially a loved one, is your full attention. It's actually priceless. And here's a radical idea. Next time you go for a walk, how about you leave your phone behind? Take mental photographs. Talk about your moments. Write them down by hand. It strengthens memories and builds meaning. Use your 5 senses to savor your life. You only have one. Hey, I'm not saying to break up with your phone, okay? Just start seeing other people in real life. And remember, nothing can ever compare to the feeling of being fully alive and fully loved. People are a big part of that. Notice them. So the next time life unfolds before you, don't scroll past it. Live it. Thank you.
Next up is an expert dedicated to making the world a kinder and healthier place for all, an expert in psychiatry, psychosomatic mind-body medicine, and public health. She teaches at Columbia University in New York City. She is also the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Rabbit Effect, and shared her work on kindness and health with audiences from Today, Good Morning America, and BBC, to the World Economic Forum, Sesame Street Workshop, the World Happiness Summit, and the United Nations. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Kelly Harding.
Thank you. As a kid, I grew up near the ocean close to St. Augustine, Florida. It's right near where explorer Ponce de Leon landed, looking for the Fountain of Youth. It's a spoiler alert, he didn't find it. For centuries, we have been looking for what might help keep us younger longer. And as a doctor, I see people get really caught up in this idea that maybe if we could just find that one ingredient in seaweed or kale or olive oil and put it in a pill and take it that we could go to dance at our great-grandchild's wedding? What if the secret to the fountain of youth is actually something hidden in our daily lives? What if it has something to do with rabbits, rats, and Pennsylvania? First, the rabbits. First, the rabbits. So when I was starting out as a young doctor at Columbia University, I got very interested in why some of my patients seemed to defy disease. So one of my mentors told me, go check out the rabbit studies. Here's what I found. I'm going to paint you a picture. We're back in the 1970s, and it was a time where we didn't even understand if eating cheeseburgers and French fries every day was not great for your health. So Dr. Robert Neeram designed a very straightforward, simple experiment. He had these genetically identical rabbits, and he gave them all the same high-fat diet, and he expected the exact same health outcome. And then, when he went to look at the data, he had a shock. One of the groups of rabbits had 60% better, one of the groups of rabbits had 60% less damage to their bodies. They were healthier. But why? At first, Dr. Neeram thought it had something to do with the study, so he checked everything, it all checked out. And then he noticed something. The research fellows who would come in would often just come into the lab, they would put down the food for the rabbits, they would put the water up, and they would leave. They were just doing their job. And then he noticed that there was this one researcher named Marina. Marina would come in, and she just couldn't help it. Marina was just warm, and she would see those bunnies, and she would take them out of their cages, and she would love on them. Oh, you beautiful bunny. And she would pet them like you would a pet at home, and the bunnies loved it. And Dr. Neeram thought, could it be that somehow the kindness that she is showing these bunnies is changing their biology? Now, I want to pause here because this is a radical idea. This is not how we think about how health works. But much to his credit, he decided to give it a try, and this time with tightly controlled conditions. So he divided half the group up, standard of care, and half got the kind, loving Marina care. And sure enough, they got the exact same results, and they published it in the journal Science. Kindness had transformed biology. Well, you might be thinking, that's great, but that can't change my genes. Well, that brings us to the rats. So it turns out that some rats are known to be much more nurturing mothers and others far less so. So if you have a nurturing mom, they tend to lick their rat pups a lot. And this actually gets passed along generation to generation. So if you have a high-licking rat mom, she has babies that then go on to have high-licking rat pups, and so on and so on. And actually, the reverse of this is true as well. So if you have a low-licking rat mom, and she will have pups that tend to be more anxious and bite. And this is a problem for researchers. So two clever scientists came up with a plan, Dr. Schiff and Dr. Meany, And they thought, now could it be that this is something about their personality that's genetically hardwired, or is it something about the nurture? So they did something very smart. They switched the pups to find out. Now, this was in the 1990s, and this was at the height of genetic determinism, the idea that your genes are your destiny. And as long as you had good genes, you were fine. So what did they find out? Well, when they took a pup of a low-licking rat mom and gave it to a high-licking rat mom, that pup went on to become a high licker herself. And then she would have high-licking pups, and so on and so on. And the reverse was true as well. This was the beginning of a revolution in genetics known as epigenetics, and this idea that actually our social world is rewriting the story of our DNA. But you might be wondering, what about humans? So let's find out. I want to take you to a little town in Pennsylvania. And the way that we got alerted to it, it was the 1960s. It was a medical conference. Probably everybody was smoking, because that's what they did at medical conferences then. And two doctors got to talking. One doctor was a researcher, Dr. Wolf, and the other doctor was working in this small town in Pennsylvania known as Roseto. And this doctor had something extraordinary to say. He's told Dr. Wolf that in his town, no one under the age of 55 died from a heart attack. People just seemed to die of old age. And when you looked at the health data, Roseto had half the deaths of the neighboring towns. Intrigued, Dr. Wolf wondered what was going on. He assembled a team, and he went to Roseto to find out. They looked through all the medical charts. They weighed people. They measured people. They took blood samples. They talked to people. And what they found was shocking. What they discovered is that the people of Roseto, they ate steaks. They smoked. They weren't particularly active in exercising either. They were pretty much just like everyone else in those respects. So what was it? And then the researchers realized the warm way that they had been welcomed into Roseto, the way that people had invited them onto their porches to have conversations, the way that families ate together, and the way that neighbors looked out for one another who were struggling. It turned out what was helping keep Roseto healthy was the kindness of their community. So the researchers decided that they would follow the story of Roseto to see what happened, because this was the 1960s, and times they were definitely changing. And as they followed along, what they found was that they started to notice that the community ties were not quite what they once were. People were, as the proverbial saying is, bowling alone, and they were starting to go, eat inside as opposed in front of the TV, as opposed to sitting on the porches eating together. And then it happened. Someone under the age of 55 had a heart attack. And that was the beginning of the data in Roseto starting to look just like the health outcomes of all the neighboring cities. And you see, as Roseto looked sicker, it's not just Roseto. In America, we are currently at, for life expectancy, 49th in the world. And that's expected to drop in the lifetime of the people sitting in this room by 2050 to 66. And that is despite spending an absolute fortune on healthcare. So this graph shows all the wealthy countries in the world and their health, related to their health outcomes and spending. And then you can see we are far on the side. It is remarkable. We are in a league of our own, and not in a good way. This is many lost dances with loved ones. But we can turn this around. We know now from mountains of data that the kindness that you give and you receive in all the different areas of your life has a tremendous impact on your physical health and your stress levels. This is what we now call social health and what I call the rabbit effect. And here's the thing, we don't actually need one more study to know to do the right thing. We can be kinder to each other starting today. That is the path forward, and that's how we heal. But you're probably thinking about, well, what about the state of the world? I mean, how do I involve the rabbits and the licking rat moms and Rosetto in my life? I mean, it really does start with you. So I'd like to give you some tools to sort of think and ideas to think about in your own life that, you have to do what feels comfortable and authentic to you. So just to start with that, trying to get that scary graph off there. Let's see if I can advance. I'll just keep going. There we go. All right, first idea, welcome touch. So maybe this looks like hugs for friends and family. It could be things like chair massages. It can even actually be hugging yourself. And I know this sounds strange and kind of sounds silly, but I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate here, and feel free to give it a try too if you feel like you'd be up for it. So actually doing this, your body can't tell the difference, and you get this incredible cascade of all these different hormones, feel-good hormones. And also, I do recommend, if you are interested in a hug, that you ask permission first, because sometimes hugs can get a little bit awkward, and as seen here. My apologies, the slides are a little slow to advance. There we go. Next, I would love for you to think about where you pay attention. In 2007, it was an amazing, life-changing year in my home because we had the delivery of two incredible moments. The first, the birth of our lovely son, Max, and the second, the arrival of our first iPhone. And only one came with a manual. But I have to say, unfortunately, they both competed for our attention, and now we have so much data that you will be happier and better connected. And I know many of the people here spoke about this today, if you simply look up from your phone. So I would encourage you to do that. And next, I would like to talk to you about the power of the pause. And we're going to practice it right now, just for a second. So take a deep breath. So studies show that we are kinder when we pause, and this is backed up by data, including one of my favorite studies. So it's Princeton University, it's back in the 1970s. There are two researchers who have decided, is kindness an inherent quality or is it something situational? So they decide to find out. The way that they do this is they ask seminary students to give a talk about the parable of the Good Samaritan. So you know the story from the Bible where the person receives an unexpected act of kindness from a stranger. And so as the students are preparing, they tell the students that they're going to be giving the lecture actually now in a building all the way across campus. And then they tell part of the group that you're going to have to rush to get over there, and the other part of the group that you're on time. And then here's the catch. They had, as part of this study, an actor who was clearly in distress, spread out on the sidewalk in between. I mean, the students practically had to walk around to get to where they were going to give the talk about the Good Samaritan. So what did they find? It turns out that part of here's what they found. For the students that felt they had enough time, almost everybody stopped. For the students that were in a rush, only 1 in 10 stopped. And I saw something like this play out in my own life the other day. I was walking my dog on a New York City street, and as I was walking, I saw a man down on the sidewalk, not moving. There were people walking by him, and I have to say, I don't judge. I know the data, and I know that they were probably in a hurry. I'm a doctor, so I went to go check on him. And when I started to check on him, the most remarkable thing happened. All these other people came to help me help him. It's just, and someone even offered to hold my dog. It just was a reminder that every human being has a capacity for kindness. We sometimes just forget to pause long enough to remember. We can't control what happens in our lives a lot, but we can always decide how we want to show up in every moment of our lives, and if we want to show up with kindness. Because here's the thing, kindness isn't just about physical health. It nourishes our soul. My favorite fun fact about kindness is it benefits not just the recipient, but also the giver, and also all of the observers. Kindness may indeed be the real fountain of youth. It's astounding, really. Thank you.
It is with great pleasure that another alum of Eastchester is here with us today. Constantine is a lifelong example of service and community. A student at Tufts University, Constantine shares reflections on purpose, legacy, and the values that sustain community. Big round of applause for Constantine.
Hello everyone, my name is Constantine Katsouris. I'm a senior at Tufts University in Boston, studying both chemistry and Spanish. I'm also on the pre-med track there and plan on graduating this May. I've grown up in Eastchester my whole life. I've made some of my closest friends here at Ann Hutch Elementary School and EMS, all of which I'm still in contact with to this day. However, it wasn't uncommon for me during my elementary and middle school years to have one of the lamest excuses imaginable for missing a Friday afternoon hangout with my friends. When I was often asked to play basketball, run some video games, or watch a movie to kickstart the coming weekend, I often had to tell my friends that I couldn't go because I had to go to Greek school instead. I know that with my complexion and hair color, it might be hard to believe that someone like me had to go to Greek school, but with 4 very Greek grandparents and over 20 second cousins that live in the country today, the truth is I'm as ethnically Greek as anybody. Because Greek school class was on Fridays, I resented it, and paying attention in class was painful if I could even gather up enough energy to do so that day. Picture 3 straight hours, all right, of reading and writing in a completely new alphabet while learning harsh grammar rules that contradicted each other, all while being screamed at by my teachers, in Greek, mind you. And then came the Greek school dance lessons. Absolute nightmare altogether is the best way to put it. But with both my parents speaking the language and my mom having lived in Greece for 4 years during her childhood, it was her wish that I learn it at least to a proficient level, and so I continued all the way through. What I didn't realize, however, is that it was this extra push in foreign language learning lessons that would eventually lead to my great interest in taking Spanish at Eastchester Middle School and in foreign language learning advocacy in general. The saying often goes something like this: if you speak 3 languages, you're called trilingual. If you speak 2, you're called bilingual. And if you speak only 1, you're called American. This is often a foreigner's favorite way to make fun of the US education system. And although our bilingual proficiency as a nation has increased to 23%, according to an online source, America the Bilingual, the truth is we still aren't nearly where we should be. Nearly half of the world's population, at 43%, is fluent in more than 1 language. European countries like Sweden, Germany, and the Netherlands have a much superior proportion of their citizens fluent in more than 1 language. Even the United Kingdom has 36% of its citizens considered bilingual, which pathetically means that we're not even the most bilingual nation to have English as its predominant language. Even countries that don't necessarily have more bilingualism than us still demonstrate more impressive feats overall in linguistics. Countries like Nigeria, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea each speak over 500 languages and dialects nationwide, with Papua New Guinea having over 800. The reason for us falling so behind in this category can potentially be explained by our young history as a nation. British colonization of North America, American imperialism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the US's major involvement in both world wars has left English to be the language of diplomacy and of the entire world. Its dominance has led Americans to believe that efforts made into learning another language would be wasteful or unnecessary. Historically, Americans have also been skeptical at the idea of foreign language learning because it involves assimilating to a culture other than their own. Ultimately, the gap between us and the top is unacceptable, and the reluctance people have shown towards foreign language learning is poorly founded. Here's why. The benefits of foreign language learning begin as early as the first few months of life. 6-month-old babies growing up in a bilingual household have improved visual memories compared to those of monolinguals. 11-month-year-olds exposed to more than 1 language have better cognitive function in areas like information processing, and the benefits continue all the way through adulthood as well. A study done on young adults showed that those who spoke more than 1 language did better on attention tests and even had improved concentration overall. What's even more impressive is bilingualism's ability to delay the symptoms of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. A study done in India showed that being bilingual can delay Alzheimer's by up to 4.5 years on average. In addition to the cognitive benefits, being bilingual has the ability to increase your career and networking value as well. In an increasingly competitive job market, knowing a second language is a fantastic way to make yourself stand out from dozens of other applicants that appear identical to you in the eyes of a hiring manager. Additionally, you'll have more opportunity to work in different geographic locations and can even specialize in working with a clientele of a specific ethnic background, something that can be both lucrative and fulfilling. A personal example I have of this is when I had the opportunity to travel to Guatemala, to a remote town about 2 hours outside the capital with an organization from my school called Tufts Global Medical Brigade. There, we set up 3 days worth of free healthcare to underprivileged group, and my Spanish came in such use there. I was able to interact with the community members and the program directors, and it amplified my experience and theirs tenfold, and I'll never forget it because of that. So, the question now becomes, how can you improve your foreign language fluency to become a more worldly citizen that can help America reach the diverse communication level of other countries around the world? The truth is, it goes way beyond the foreign language requirement mandated by your high schools and universities. If you truly want to be able to speak another language with ease, you have to immerse yourself in it fully. If you want to improve your Spanish, listen to Bad Bunny's most recent album at the gym on repeat. If you want to improve your French, pick out your favorite Netflix series, change the subtitles to French, and binge watch. If you want to improve your Greek, good luck. By familiarizing your tongue and your ears with a new language, you're opening up new neural networks that allow you to communicate and express yourself in a different verbal code. Yes, it takes time and effort, but the result grants you with an invaluable skill set that serves you for life. My final message to you all is this: In an ever-globalizing nation, and as a country that prides itself on our diversity, we have an obligation to go beyond the foreign language requirements of our schools. The notion that the U.S. is a melting pot of cultures is completely useless if citizens from different ethnic backgrounds can't communicate with each other and with the rest of the world. Additionally, fields like geopolitics, medicine, and others rely on precise communication with small room for misunderstandings and error, showing yet again how important diverse communication is in our society today. Despite the gap between us and other countries, we can do it, however. The linguistic variety that exists between us and other countries is proof that we descend from social beings with an aptitude and a capacity to take on multiple forms of communication at the same time. The best part about continuing or starting your bilingual journey is that you have full freedom to pick whatever language you want. So if you start somewhere, are true to your progress, and aren't afraid to make mistakes, that part is very key. You're well on your way to improved cognitive function, more memorable travel experiences, and becoming a more worldly and modern citizen overall. That's everything I have for you guys today, but before I sign off, it wouldn't make sense if I left without at least talking the talk a little bit. And so with that, muchísimas gracias por escucharme hoy, que todos tengan un buen día, que Salonika, σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την προσοχή σας, να έχετε όλοι μια καλή ημέρα. Thank you all for listening to me today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We're just going to let our students transition out of the auditorium for a moment. Our next speaker is the Dean of the Graduate School at Sarah Lawrence College and a dear friend. Dr. Kim Ferguson bridges empathy and education, asking how schools can cultivate compassion and curiosity in a rapidly changing world. Having grown up in South Africa, Dr. Ferguson speaks deeply to the power of engagement in the classroom. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Kim Ferguson.
The year was 1995. I was 14 years old. Nelson Mandela had just been elected as the first democratically elected president of South Africa, after 30 years of imprisonment for his fight for freedom. As a South African by descent, I was proud and relieved. At the same time, in my home country of Malawi, we had gone through a series of protests to establish a multi-party system of government after 30 years of dictatorship. It was a time of hope. Perhaps equally importantly, the South African national rugby team had won the Rugby World Cup after many years of being excluded from international competition because of the apartheid system. Nelson Mandela emerged in his green Springbok jersey, and we all waved our flags proudly as we cheered on our new multiracial team and celebrated the rebirth of our rainbow nation. it was a time of transformation. At the same time, it was the height of the AIDS pandemic. And my country, and many around it, were devastated by its impacts. Our extended family network, that had previously been able to absorb orphaned infants and children into its system, was no longer able to cope. And as a result, there was nowhere to go for many orphaned infants and children. As a result, infant homes were established to support vulnerable infants, many of them sick, many of them severely malnourished, many of them with HIV/AIDS, many of them needing infant formula and access to clean water for it. It was easy to feel helpless. It was at that time that my high school decided it was essential that as teenagers, we would engage in effective community collaboration as part of our holistic education. And so I joined a club, and I traveled every week to one of the infant homes to provide just a little bit of support for the infants and their caregivers. I was assigned a 4-month-old called Chisomo. She was severely malnourished. She couldn't hold up her head, and she had never smiled. I had no idea what to do. So I took one step forward, and I tried a few things. I tried a game where I dip her head up and down, with very little response. But after coming for several weeks, Chisomo came to know me. And one day, when I was dipping her head up and down, her face came up to mine, and she smiled for the very first time. That moment was transformative. I learned about the power of play, about the transformative power of turning up for someone else. And I resolved to continue to work in collaboration with my community to understand its needs. With my best friend, I established an after-school program for street children who weren't able to go to school. And I worked in a local maternity ward where we scrubbed dried blood off the beds on which women delivered their babies. I learned then about the power of economic inequality. And I also learned the Southern African proverb that says, "Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu." A person is only a person through other people. I resolved to become a pediatrician so that I could return to my community and support the infants that I had spent so much time with. So I went to college, and I took, in my first semester, organic chemistry, an intro to psychology. And I was hooked. As I began to better understand the different ways in which our physical and social environments impact our lives, I decided that that was the direction that I needed to take in my own work. I also learned that much of what I read about child and human development in my textbooks didn't necessarily reflect what I saw in my own community. And this is because less than 10% of developmental science research has studied communities that make up 90% of the world's population. I resolved to change this, beginning with my own undergraduate thesis, where I returned to these infant homes to study the attachment development of the infants who lived in these homes. All of the literature suggested that they were forming insecure, unhealthy attachments with the caregivers that turned up day in and day out, every day. But this literature came largely from Europe, from institutions behind the Iron Curtain. And this didn't seem to reflect what I had seen. And it wasn't. I found that these infants formed secure attachments with their caregivers, and that this was foundational for their ability to play, to learn, and to live healthy lives and return into their extended family network when they were able. Unfortunately, what I saw in these institutions reflects much of developmental science research even today. Or as developmental theorist Yuri Bronfenbrenner noted in the 1970s, it can be said that much of developmental science research is about the strange behavior of children in strange situations with strange adults for the briefest possible period of time. I resolved in my own work to better understand the full context in collaboration with community so that we can really better understand the physical and social environments that impact children's life, and perhaps identify some ways in which we might transform them. I also learned through this work about the power of play as a proximal process that drives development. As children play, they actively engage in their own environments and direct their own development. Through this work, in graduate school and later at Sarah Lawrence, I became interested also in better understanding effective community collaboration. I became interested in community-based participatory action research and developed relationships with local schools and communities, where I was able to bring my college students into collaboration with their local communities as they studied issues of poverty in America and child and adolescent development in the United States and Africa, so that they could better understand human development, working with the humans that they were supposedly studying. I also had the opportunity to bring in high school students to this work in collaboration with Assistant Superintendent Bill Meyer. And we were able to bring our high school and college students together too to learn from each other. As part of this work, the Child Development Institute at Sarah Lawrence established community adventure play experiences. These are play opportunities for children in all communities, beginning in Yonkers and later in Zimbabwe, South Africa, Tanzania, Antigua, where we aim to establish opportunities for children to collaborate with other children and families in their local communities using natural and found materials in their own environments, thus providing a sustainable opportunity for their play. Through all of this work, I came to better understand the ways in which we can show up and should show up, and the ways in which our showing up might also be sometimes harmful. As the Indigenous Australian activist Lila Watson and her colleagues noted, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. In the face of major local and global challenges, it is easy for us to feel overwhelmed and helpless, just as I did as a 14-year-old in the midst of the AIDS pandemic in Malawi. But I have learned that if we take the first step, and then the next, and then the next, we can find our community, and we can work to transform it together. Or, as the great wizard Gandalf from J.R.R. Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring says, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. And, as the Tanzanian proverb says, little by little, a little becomes a lot. May we take that first step, and then the next, and then the next, together in collaborative community, that we might then transform our communities, and through the process, ourselves. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to introduce our next speaker, a celebrated senior here at EHS, as well as an artist whose work hangs in the U.S. Capitol building. Joey Piergiovanni's story is one of resilience and courage, finding voice and meaning through art. Please welcome Joey to the stage.
I'd like to start my talk today with a story about a little library in a cramped daycare classroom. I remember walking into that daycare classroom actually carrying the bookshelf of the library, which was way too wide to fit in the doorframe. But what was more important about this story than just the bookshelf or the kids reading it was the fact that my arms weren't sore and I was able to put the bookshelf down in the corner and the kids ran right up to it. After mumbling the thank yous that their teacher instructed them to give to me, they ran through my legs, around my other side, and they immediately grabbed the book, which attracted their attention the most. These books were all about topics like environmental conservation, about leading figures in that field, and about ecological diversity. And seeing the look on these kids' faces as they grabbed the books, about books they never had before, never had access to, they didn't have the resources for, and they looked up at me with a twinkle in their eye, and I knew that I was actually making a change within my community. Granted, it might have been small and on the local level, but any change matters. And I was able to help their community and be part of their everyday life. And community to me isn't simply just a bookshelf in a small daycare classroom. Rather, it started for me when I was a kid in my backyard. Community for me was 3 rectangular planters, which my dad bought for me at Home Depot. And they consisted of tomato plants, basil, and oregano. And while I'm sure my parents wanted me to find a community of people, I think they settled for the fact that my plants were living. And although they were living, they weren't for long. I completely overwatered all of those plants and they died in their pots. But instead of actually focusing on what the tomatoes produced or how many basil leaves I ended up with at the end of the night, I was more focused on, especially reflecting now, the fact that I was growing something from nothing. Even if I didn't end up with fruit, just seeing the leaves on the branches was something that I was going to treasure. And especially now, reflecting back on my high school career, I realized that the first time I ever pursued environmental science, or even gardening in a more academic sense, was in my 9th grade AP Environmental Science class. This class introduced me to a lot of different topics that finally put words to the topics that I was so interested in as a child. I learned about what it meant to be ecologically diverse, what a food chain really meant, or even what happens when we do cellular respiration in our bodies and we break down glucose. And granted, I wasn't just interested in environmental science for the STEM. I was more interested in it for the interdisciplinary study that it offered me. I really loved history as a kid. I loved reading books, and getting to understand the effect that humans had on the environment was something that I was going to treasure for the rest of my life. I mean, we learn about things like nuclear power, right? And we know that they're environmentally friendly, and we know that although they have some, radioactive decay at the end of the day, it's more sustainable than carbon-based fuels. But instead of just thinking about that, I thought more about what the perception of progress looked. I mean, nuclear power looks good in the sense that, oh, we're producing more energy and we're moving forward technologically. But what about the water used to cool those reactors? That warm water has to go somewhere, and it's dumped immediately into the lakes, rivers, and reservoirs that they came from. And that leads to deoxygenation of the water, and those plants and animals die because they don't have enough oxygen. And this topic was something that I really wanted to pursue when I came into high school, and I ended up doing things such as volunteering or even creating those libraries. I mean, I was able to pursue things that I never really would have thought possible in the sense. I mean, I was able to find community at my local nature center, teaching kids about different endangered animals, holding endangered chinchillas where kids can pet their 400 hairs per follicle, or having a ball python wrapped around my arm like I was Superman. Seeing the kids so interested in something that they never had seen before was something that, again, I was going to treasure for the rest of my life and continue to pursue. And that was what actually led me to my independent project of creating the libraries. I mean, I partnered with local community bookstores and libraries, and I set up donation bins. And in trying to build a community at these daycare centers for the kids, I figured I would ask my community for help. I said, I'm looking to build a community full of education, environmental diversity, and promote different understanding of the world around us. And the community did not fail me. I raised over $500 and 75 used books to curate these bookshelves at the daycare center. And seeing those kids' faces and seeing them interested in learning about something that they never had access for was going to become a foundational part to who I am and what I continue to do today. And parallel to my interest in environmental science, I also began art. I mean, as a kid, I was always the kid that was great at coloring in the lines, right? I knew that red faded well into orange, and then you could use the complementary color of blue to create contrast. But high school art class was something different. It wasn't just a graduation requirement to me. It was a place where I found a different community, one that not only I had to create, but one that was going to help me be part of it. I mean, my art class is sitting here today, and they literally inspired me to do half of the artwork that I have. I mean, without them and without them pushing me to delve deeper into my interests, I don't know where I would be today. I mean, Miss Sid Lowski, who coached me on forming my thesis for my AP Studio art project, or the thread that ties all of my future projects together, she told me, and I'll summarize because I don't remember her exact words, to go back to what I was first interested in, what I can remember first being passionate about. And what I immediately went back to was my garden, was volunteering. And I knew that I needed to do something about environmental science, and I needed to do something about conservation and promote more education about that subject. And art offered me a place to express my voice in a sense that wasn't just talking. I mean, if any of you guys know me personally, you know I love to talk, and I'll talk for hours about anything on end. But art was more intentional. I could use my art to say something that I wasn't able to just in person. I could reflect ideas that you can't just say in words. And that led me to create one of my largest projects of probably my lifetime, that being my artwork, Poisoned by Progress. Just to kind of explain what the artwork is, in the center you'll see a really ornate vase, and that is to represent our traditional values of a human society. And out of the vase you'll see growing really pretty flowers. And granted, while they may look pretty on the surface, I specifically chose flowers like belladonna because they are poisonous to human beings. And above the plants you'll see 3 plastic water bottles feeding water, feeding life into these poisonous flowers. And in the background, you'll see 2 politicians shaking hands in front of the US Capitol building. The gold leaf also represents the glorification of the destruction of our environment and the poisoning of our own ideals in human society. And specifically, if you would have noticed, the background was blue, and I chose that medium specifically because it's called cyanotype. It's when you put UV reactive chemical on a canvas and a stencil over top of it, so that way when you use a UV machine, the stencil will appear and you will have your artwork in the blue font. But what I didn't expect was that Ms. Sid would encourage me to pursue art in a more competitive sense, uploading my art to the congressional art competition just for laughs. I mean, I didn't think I'd win. I didn't even know it existed until Ms. Sid had told me about it. So imagine my surprise when my mom calls me and I'm getting yelled at because I've just been invited to the US Capitol by our local congressman because he selected my artwork. That was a difficult conversation to have and a lot of explaining I had to do. But I'm standing there in the US Capitol, months later after being selected, standing in front of my artwork, smiling for pictures, but the only thing I can think about is that garden, is the bookshelf, is my environmental science class. And I realized that although I'm so passionate about environmental science and I love working with art, what really was reflective to me about all of it was the fact that I was using my voice. And I was using my voice not just to talk. I mean, granted, I could talk about anything, but using my voice intentionally and in different methods is something that I think is so creative and is so important that we do in our society today. I mean, whether it's artwork, whether it's literature, whether it's education, whether it's talking at a TED Talk, I mean, using your voice in any way possible to create real change within your community, national, local, or even just education about topics that you're passionate about is something that I implore each and every one of you to pursue in your own lives. I mean, it's one thing to learn about a topic, it's another thing to actually do something about it, right? You can learn about math, you can learn about engineering, but who's gonna land that plane, who's gonna land that spaceship on Mars if you're not the one to engineer it? Who's gonna create the newest Michelin star restaurant if you're not the one to cook the meals? You have to have a passion for a subject, just like I did about environmental science and art, and you have to find your own way to express your voice to get what you want. Otherwise, it's just useless. You gotta find your voice in any way possible and use it to pursue whatever you want. And whether that's the intersection of art, the intersection of politics, the environment, mathematics, engineering, literature, there's any combination of roads that you can take throughout your life. It just matters about finding the intersection that's right for you and using your voice to call yourself to that exact spot. Thank you.
Thank you. And what makes Eastchester special are our teachers. No doubt our next speaker is one of those. Jen Gavin is a storyteller and educator. Jen explores how the narratives we share and those we keep shape our understanding of ourselves and one another. Please welcome to the stage, Jen Gavin.
Thank you. Hello. So, there I was, in an old Soviet train hurtling eastward somewhere in Czechoslovakia. For some reason, there were chickens running around, and the thugs in the aisle are having a slap fight. It was 1993. I didn't have my passport, and I was on the wrong train. And I just remember thinking, this is gonna make such a great story. There's something about stories. What would we be without stories? Today I'm gonna talk to you guys about the purpose of stories, the power, the absolute necessity of stories. And I'll also talk to you about who the storyteller is and why narratives are fundamental to education. Storytellers have such power. We're almost hardwired to think and communicate in stories. It has a certain hold over us, you might say. Why? Well, stories are a barometer of a culture. They really transmit what a civilization cherishes and fears the most. About 20 years ago, there was a big vampire craze. All the stories, all the movies were about vampires, Twilight. What did that mean? Was it because we felt drained by something when we had felt safe previously? What did that mean? And it was zombies. Zombies all over the place. Books, TV shows. Why zombies? Well, maybe it's because the demands of the modern world sometimes make us feel like we're being relentlessly pursued and devoured. And we never want to become the walking dead. What's more terrifying than being alive but not having a soul? They're a barometer of culture, and they're also extremely powerful because it's not just that they shape us and convey our values, it's that they actually have almost a supernatural power to alter the physical world. So kids watching TV in the 1960s, well, they grew up and invented cell phones. And the first cell phone, the flip phone, was inspired and directly modeled after a Star Trek communicator. Skyscrapers, airplanes, lasers, organ transplants. They all existed in this imaginative realm before they became realities, all because somebody was inspired by a story and said, what if? Now, there's a misapprehension out there that it's worth correcting at this moment. And that is that stories are about what happens. That stories are literal and linear. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. And that's a lie that's actually kept alive by online summary sites like SparkNotes. Because story is not about plot. You could read a plot summary, but that's just a list of events. You're not likely to remember any of it because you haven't gone on a journey with that character through the story. But stories, I dare everyone here to get to Arthur Morgan's last ride in Red Dead Redemption 2 without crying your eyes out. And make no mistake about it, we are powerfully influenced in stories, and we're so invested in them. When a story doesn't end the way that we want it to, we're not just disappointed, we're insulted. A terrible movie sequel? How dare they? We expect a lot from our stories. How about that Sopranos ending? That series finale, that uproar was beautiful because it spoke to how immersed people get in these stories and they care about it so much. And that controversy, I mean, there were people all over the world who never saw the series, but they watched that last episode so they could join the conversation. So invested over something that's not even real. Yet it's the unreality of fiction that is exactly the source of its power. Those of you familiar with The Things They Carried might remember that the author, Tim O'Brien, he distinguishes between what he calls emotional truth and historical truth. So I ask you, does it have to be true to be real? Maybe you remember the childhood fable of George Washington. He was 6 years old, he got a hatchet for his birthday, and the first thing he did was go out and chop down a big cherry tree in his yard. And his father comes to him and says, "Son, did you chop down that cherry tree?" And little George says, "Father, I cannot tell a lie. It was I. I chopped down the cherry tree." And that story never happened. Never happened. Doesn't even make sense. How long would it take a 6-year-old with a hatchet? What's the motivation there? Is that story real? No. But is it true? Absolutely. Because it speaks to the virtues that define George Washington the most: his honesty, his direct manner of speaking. We could read a list of George Washington's accomplishments and the facts, but it might be hard to apply factual details to our own lives. And stories make those details universal so we can feel something about them and feel like we're in it with them. For example, we are not emancipated slaves living in Ohio just after the Civil War. But chances are you felt haunted by something from your past that has a grip on you and it won't let go. Well, that tells us something about being human. And when you're in that other realm where you're invested, you're sitting together with other people. You're having conversations with other people who've ever heard that story and anyone who will ever hear that story. And as we know, the opposite of depression is connection. Sometimes we get so absorbed in a story that we are lifted outside of time itself. Like, that flew. Whoa, how did 2 hours just go by? Well, stories are timeless and they're eternal. That's why we write and speak in what we call the literary present tense. So it's not that J. Gatsby in 1922 yearned for the past. No, he yearns for the past, present tense. Right now, he's gazing longingly at the light at the end of the dock. Dude, it's never going to happen. But at the same time, Don Quixote is battling windmills. Dr. Frankenstein is shrieking in horror at this creation that comes alive on his lab table. Present tense. And right now, Scout Finch is recognizing the man who saved her life. And her eyes are blurring with tears as she says, "Hey, boo." That's what stories can do for us. And we expect a lot out of our storytellers. Through the ages, a lot of communities have really valued their best storytellers. Aesop, Shakespeare, Kurosawa, Spielberg. And no one would ever remember their stories. Their stories would completely die out if people just read summaries of them or they just tuned them out. Steven Spielberg was once asked, when you die, if you met God, what's the one thing you would want him to say to you? And his reply was, thanks for listening. Listening. Are we really listening? I mean, are we absorbing the signs and symbols of the universe and trying to form them into meaning, into a story? Alice Walker's character, Shug Avery, she remarks, God is longing for us to notice the color purple. Now, that's listening. That author, that character is so tuned in. Are we listening to each other? Now, there's a trend that is alarming to English teachers. We've talked about it a lot. And it's this philosophy of reading that says the book means what I want it to mean. No, it does not. A great story will mean many things. And the discussion, it brings it to life, the joy of all these different interpretations. But deep listening is not forcing yourself or your own views onto a story. It'd be a shame if instead of empathizing with a character, if you just shove them off the stage. The most extreme version of this is when people say, that story, that author, that's going to say what I want it to say. That's not scholarship. It's narcissism. Whereas storytelling is something that happens in a group. It's a collective. Everybody who's ever heard that story, think about it. You are lifted to this higher realm, as I have said. William Shakespeare's Henry V gave his men an inspiring talk before battle. And he tells them, we're going to go down in history until the end of the world. But then he says something really interesting. When he's describing the men, he says, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. It's a band of brothers, because it is collective. It's a tricky business, this storytelling. The best storyteller ceases to exist. The whole point is to lead the audience away from the speaker and hold up something that we're all looking at together. Storytellers got to disappear. It's a tricky business, this storytelling. This is why we get so frustrated when we're trying to tell someone a story and we're all into it and we're all excited and we just get the blank face. It's so, you have to scrap it sometimes and say, you just had to be there. Think about that jumbo sense of failure. Why is that so embarrassing? We get all sheepish. We might avoid eye contact, pray for the subject to change. So what does this all mean in the classroom? Well, for one thing, it means that vocabulary takes on cosmic significance. We have an infinite variety of experiences and emotions and thoughts, and the same 20 words that people tend to use over and over again are flat. A lot of times they've lost their meaning. And words like good, bad, sad, mad, mean, scary. Students can't build a bridge to each other, and they can't lift others up if they don't have enough rungs. Word origins. The story magic is cooking when we're talking about word origins, allusions. We're talking about the meaning and origin behind some of these phrases that we use. So students know exactly what it's like to have the sword of Damocles hanging over them. College application deadlines. They know what it is to be Julius Caesar, about to cross the Rubicon past the point of no return. Students will encounter these out in the world. They'll be reading them. They might hear somebody else say it. And when they hear somebody else say it, when they both share that story, they have that story in common, it's an instant connection. It's the silent head nod, secret fist bump, because they're speaking the same language. They speak story. They're a band of brothers. There is a thrill when your friend comes rushing up to you and is like, dude, you will not believe what just happened. Is there a better sentence in the English language? Thank you for listening.
Okay, another amazing 12th grade student at EHS, Sarah Mortensen, represents an intergenerational framework redefining learning. She'll share how students and human beings learn across generations. A big round of applause for Sarah Mortensen.
I have a best friend. We hang out often, almost always at her house, and we talk about a variety of things, from how school is going to our favorite fall activities. We particularly love talking about literature. We like reading the works of Bronte, Shakespeare, Burnett. We suggest our favorite books to each other. We deep dive into poetry. It's so fun. We understand each other in ways that others don't, and I've learned a lot from my discussions with her. There is one difference between us that you should know. While I'm a senior in high school, she's a senior citizen. She is several generations older than I am. No, she's not my grandma or my relative, and I'm not seeing her for community service requirements. We're just best friends. Intergenerational relationships, like the one I have with my friend, have been the fabric of humankind as long as we have existed. From the filial piety of ancient China to the griots of West Africa, interactions between the old and young have been fundamental in passing on wisdom. Our memories come from stories. When we learn right and wrong, it comes from stories. And our stories come from our elders. Think about your grandparents or a person from another generation in your life. I know those people that have given me knowledge. One person that comes to mind is my maternal grandpa, who we call Bopti. He loves family history. He's taught me about my Danish ancestors who bravely journeyed across the Atlantic Ocean in search of a new home. He's taught me about the pioneers who didn't give up crossing the plains with covered wagons and handcarts. And he's taught me about a spunky family of sisters that grew up during the Great Depression. Not only have I learned geography and history, but I've learned the importance of values like bravery, hard work, and laughter. He also gave me these epic shoes, which he insisted were called Chuck Taylor's, not Converse. And when he gave me these shoes, he told me the story when he wore these same shoes in high school. Every time I interact with him, he gives me all kinds of new knowledge. Now think about today's world. If you said the word education to anybody my age, what would they think of? Probably a brick building, test scores, grades? Young people have become accustomed to standardized learning. Now, this organized structure does lead to new knowledge and skills, but many students think of learning as a transaction, not an interaction. They don't realize that interesting ideas can be easily accessible outside of the classroom too. True learning can come naturally from intergenerational relationships. If you talk to someone born 50 years before you, you're guaranteed to learn something new. These exchanges of knowledge are deeper and more soul-filling. This intergenerational learning is driven by passion and interest and yields authentic intellectual growth. We don't just listen, we engage. We seek out connections and we maintain them. Intergenerational learning isn't measured by a test. It's something you live. In this unprecedented moment in history, there are many new types of learning tools. One of these is the large language model, also known as generative AI. With artificial intelligence, information from any source can be accessed and synthesized with a mere phrase anytime we want it. AI can define a term for you, explain your math homework, write an email, write an essay, or create a 20-page analysis of multiple articles on biological phenomena without having to read a single one. In a recent article by Sean Cho A, he says, "What AI can't do is feel the shape of silence after someone says something so honest, we forget we're here to learn. What it can't do is pause mid-sentence because it remembered the smell of its father's old chair. What it can't do is sit in a room full of people who are trying and failing to make sense of something that maybe can't be made sense of. That's the job of teaching." Artificial intelligence is a machine learning tool that attempts to replicate human learning. It can't accomplish what human connections can. It gives us access to unlimited information, and yet if we rely on it too much, it limits the time we spend with our elders. We should not be deceived into thinking that this new technology provides all the information we'll ever need. Before turning to artificial intelligence as the solution to all your educational problems, please realize that there is authentic intelligence waiting to be shared by people you haven't met. When I think of spending time with my friend that I talked about earlier, it isn't taking notes or copying and pasting what she said. It's engaging with her in conversations. More so than the answers, it's the questions we ask. It's creating a connection, a real friendship that changes us for the better. I am so grateful for her. I have some invitations for you to access deeper wisdom and deeper connections with the people around you. Deliver a holiday treat to that old neighbor and ask them about themselves. Call your grandparents and come to them with interest and time. And next time you're waiting in line, don't look down, look up, and find someone to connect with. Because people of every generation are all around you, Knowledge is all around you. Wisdom begins with one connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And at this time, we'll allow our students to dismiss out of the auditorium. All right, lastly, our very own Dr. William Meyer, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, Assessment, and Student Success, closes the program by inviting us to consider how relationships, trust, and emotional connection can renew the very heart of learning. Drawing on over 2 decades in education and his ongoing work at the intersection of well-being and innovation, Dr. Meyer explores how recentering human connection can transform both the classroom and the culture of schools. Please give a round of applause for Dr. Meyer.
Thank you. I've been in education now for over 20 years, and I can say that teaching has been one of the great joys of my life. I love being in the classroom. I love connecting with students, working through their questions, challenging them, watching them grow. It's really an incredible vocation to be a part of. And I think most teachers would agree when you ask them what are some of the best parts of being a teacher, that vacation would be at the top of that list. Teaching is a very demanding physical vocation. Sometimes it feels like you literally turn yourself inside out to meet the needs of the students. And so having opportunities to reset, to restore, to rejuvenate is so important in the sustainability of the work. 2 years ago, I had the chance with my family, while on spring break, to visit a place out in the desert called Badwater Basin. Badwater is a very unique spot. It's actually the lowest point in North America at 282 feet below sea level. It's got one of the highest evaporation rates of any place on Earth, and it's just a land of contrast. You can stand there in the salt flat at the bottom of an ancient lake. It can be 90, 100 degrees, and off in the distance you can see snow-capped mountains. But one of the really strange things about Badwater is when you begin to walk across the salt flat, it's very difficult to get any perception of space and time. All the things that you would look to that would offer reference points, trees, people, buildings, cars, none of that exists. So in Badwater, you can literally walk for miles, hours, and feel like you're making no progress at all. The landscape literally feels unchanging. And I would argue in many ways, education has a little bit of that same feel. We go back 100, even 200 years, honestly, the spaces of learning in which we enjoy today are not very different from the ones that our grandparents and their grandparents experienced. They had desks, We still have desks in most cases. Sometimes we have tables. Sometimes they're in the shape of kidney beans, but not much has changed. They had chalkboards, which became whiteboards, which today are smart boards, but essentially it's the same function. They had teachers. We have computers. That was a joke. That was a joke. Not yet. But the idea is that we've put devices and technology in the hands of all students, and yet some of the issues are enduring and perpetual. Disengagement, struggle with absenteeism, and just overall growth of our students. I would argue that in the course of my short life, not much has changed in terms of what's taken place in schools. When I first entered the profession in the early 2000s, it was just on the heels of No Child Left Behind. This was a policy and an idea that really came out of the experiences in Texas, where if we can just quantify both the successes and gaps within students and their learning, we'll be able to address it. 10 years later, there's a financial collapse. In the midst of a piece of legislation that came out of that financial collapse was another educational reform called Race to the Top. This time, we're going to take those test scores, apply it to teacher performance, and that's going to resolve the issue. The following 10 years, we saw ourselves getting devices in the hands of students, one-on-one computers, as much as we could do to individualize the learning experience. Global pandemic struck. We found students solely on those devices, learning virtually, learning asynchronously, and we're still picking up the pieces of that. Today, we're in an AI revolution with the possibilities of things being individualized, things being innovated in ways we never expected, but in truth, the reality is we will probably find ourselves in a similar predicament as the one we've struggled with for the last quarter century. I think actually the way forward requires us to look backwards. And I look back about 50 years to two individuals that I feel like seed a framework for education to guide us into the next part of this century. One of those individuals is a Buddhist monk. The other was a Trappist monk, and they came together in the midst of another crisis in conflict, which was the Vietnam War, to engage in an interreligious dialogue and begin to look for solutions that were plaguing not only their countries, but the world. Thich Nhat Hanh was born in Vietnam. He was raised Buddhist. He joined the monastery at a very young age, despite his parents hoping that he would not. His opposition to the war in Vietnam did two things. One, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King, and two, it led to his exile from Vietnam, of which he didn't return until the late 1990s. But Thich Nhat Hanh articulated a very powerful concept in which he called engaged Buddhism, engaged contemplation, which is rather than just retreating to the monasteries for prayer, meditation, reflection, one also needed to engage in the world around them, in service, in purpose, meeting those needs and engaging those voices. Merton, literally a world away, was born in France, educated in England, found his way to a monastery in Kentucky just before World War II, wrote quite prolifically, and he began an idea that is incredibly relevant to us today. In a series of letters to a student from Columbia, he articulated the notion of the education of the whole self. His feeling was that we focus far too much on the mind, at the absence of the emotional self, the physical self, and of course, the spiritual self. Together, these two individuals lay out a framework and constellation of ideas that I'm excited to share with you guys today. I've had the opportunity to actually visit Merton's archives, to walk the trails that he walked around Gethsemane Monastery, and to actually sit in the pews in which he prayed. I've also been fortunate to read Han's works, to listen to him, his podcast, and to actually see him speak in one of his monasteries in upstate New York. And it's out of that research and those conversations and that dialogue that I want to present to you this framework to guide us forward, Restore. Restore is an interesting concept, and it really begins with a foundational principle that we have to recenter education around relationships. That relationships are at the heart of teaching and learning. Just like the relationship between Merton and Hahn was what inspired a dialogue that transcended space and time, we have to recenter the human relationship within the classroom. The second piece is emotions. Unfortunately, often when we think about emotions in the classroom, it's reactive, it's when students are in crisis, but emotions are essentially the guidance system of the self. We need to engage students in joy, passion, purpose. When I see my former students, they talk to me about an emotional experience. Feeling supported, feeling challenged, feeling inspired. Those are the things we need to think about as teachers and educators. I would also argue self-reflection. Now, when we think about reflection, unfortunately, it's been incredibly commodified, and it usually gets reduced to just feedback. I'm not talking about the survey that you fill out at the end of a flight. I'm talking about deep thinking, internalizing the concepts and the ideas that you are taught, seeing how they're relevant to your own life. Rather than filling spaces, we need to think about creating spaces as educators and teachers. The next piece, which I think is so important, is trust. If you walk around a school district or a building today, you will see millions of dollars put into the physical safety of that building. But in truth, there's an interior safety which comes from trust. It was mentioned earlier this morning, the importance of vulnerability as a way to connect heart to heart. We need to reconsider that in our work, our relationships, and our engagement with our students. The other piece is openings. So often we have these curriculums where we are in service to the curriculum is not in service to the students or classes. We need to look at the opportunities, the unfoldings, the openings that exist in the course of a school year. I don't think Merton or Hahn would have invited the Vietnam War and the challenges that brought into their lives, but both of them were wise enough to see that as an opportunity to begin a new conversation. We need to reframe the curriculum as of service to us, not us in service to it. The other thing that is so important as we think about this and we look at this framework is also this idea of rigor. When we think about education, unfortunately, you mentioned the emotional self, we often forget the challenges that must be required in order for us to grow. It's not without challenge that we expand ourselves, our sense of self, who we are, what we believe we can do. I always saw the classroom as a safe space in which I could really challenge my students and push them beyond their norms and capacity, to offer them the ability to connect to something in themselves that they did not know they even possessed. And the last piece to this framework, which I think is so important, is engagement. And this goes directly back to Hahn. It's that idea that we go inward to be of service to the world around us. We look at this moment, this event, this TEDx, as an opportunity to engage the space around us. No longer can we look at the classroom as defined by the physical walls. We must look at ways to engage the community, local and global, in the learning of our students. As I go back to that place and I think about Badwater, and I recognize that, in fact, it is a place that is forever changing. While on the surface, it might look unchangeable, immutable. In fact, beneath it, there are cracks, there are life, there are possibility. I think as we move into the next part of this century, we should look back, reconnect to that deeper sense of self, and restore the soul of education. Thank you so much.
As we bring TEDx Eastchester to a close, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who made today possible. To our incredible speakers, thank you for sharing your stories, your insights, and your hearts. Each of you reminded us that service, community, and connection are not abstract ideas. They're lived every day through acts of courage, creativity, and compassion. And to our planning team, volunteers, students, staff, the building administrations at both the high school and the middle school, me, the superintendent, and the assistant superintendent is what's written here, for Human Resources of Technology, the Board of Education, and especially community partners, thank you for the countless hours you've dedicated to bringing this vision to life. Your commitment, collaboration, and care have made today something truly special. And finally, to our audience, thank you for being here, for listening deeply, and for believing in the power of ideas to inspire change. Let's carry forward what we've heard today, the spirit of service, the strength of community, and the beauty of connection, and continue to make Eastchester a place where ideas take root and grow. Thank you so much. I do think there's a little reception outside, so please join us for that.